Vietnam War, which was the war that was being fought when I was growing up, is another very divisive conflict in American history. Americans entered the war because they felt like communism was beginning to dominate the world, and they felt like if Vietnam fell to communist powers, that would be another step in the loss of democratic governments around the world. This section tells a story of that conflict. We start with a bank of televisions that trace the history of the conflict from President Eisenhower's involvement through Kennedy and Johnson and into the time that the United States left Vietnam and the North Vietnamese did win the war. And it shows both the domestic concerns and protests against the war and what was going on the battlefield. One of the most poignant areas in the exhibition is this recreation of a cell at the Hanoi Hilton. The prisoners of war, American prisoners of war in Vietnam, were a continuing story and a part of the war that the American government refused to leave Vietnam until it could secure the release of all the prisoners. And this recreation of the Hanoi Hilton sort of recaptures their story and reminds people of the human sacrifice and the human cost of being in the war. But you can look into the cell and you can see a prisoner doing what was called the tap code. The prisoners learned how to tap on the wall and send messages to each other and stay in communication in the Hanoi Hilton in very surprising ways. We also have many artifacts that they had. They're very primitive cups and things that they had. They had so few things that the few things that they brought back were very meaningful to them. And we are grateful at the Smithsonian that many of those prisoners gave those objects to us so that we could present them to our visitors to remember this important episode of the Vietnam War.